Welcome to the SAP HANA Academy. My name's Bob, and in this series of videos we'll be going through SAP HANA Vora 1.3. In this series of videos we'll be going through the installation. In this first of two videos we're going to be looking at installing and configuring Apache Zeppelin so it can be used with SAP HANA Vora. In the previous few videos what we did is we installed SAP HANA Vora 1.3. And we looked at testing that SAP HANA Vora worked, or the SAP HANA Vora tools, as you can see here. We also looked at the various services available to us when using the SAP HANA Vora Manager. We installed this on top of a Hadoop which we created with Ambari, and we even created our own instance in AWS. Now, even though SAP HANA Vora 1.3 has its own data browser and SQL editor, some users like to use other tools in order to interact with Spark-based data and applications. So in this video we're going to look at how to install Apache Zeppelin, which is a web-based notebook that enables interactive data analytics, and get Apache Zeppelin working with SAP HANA Vora. So if you want to find out what Apache Zeppelin is, all you need to do is go to Google and do a search for Apache Zeppelin. So there's obviously a page, it's an Apache product, and again it enables you to create these interactive data analytics, and for us that will be connecting to SAP HANA Vora. Now there are different versions of Apache Zeppelin, so in order to know which one you need to install you just need to do some work and check on your existing SAP HANA Vora installation which version of Scala you're using, which is how we connect to Spark. It's very easy to do. So I'm back on my SAP HANA Vora Linux server. What I'm going to do is I'm going to log into my server. I'm going to log in as the root user, and I'm going to, of course, go as my cluster admin user. Now, what we need to do is launch the SAP HANA Vora Spark shell and check what version of Scala is being used. So if I go into my SAP HANA Vora scripts folder, and if I do an ls, this is the various scripts where we can launch SAP HANA Vora Spark shell. Of course, if I do a /start Spark shell, we need to launch the Spark shell in order to find out what version of Scala we're using. Of course, there's other ways to do it. This is the way I'm going to do it. So firstly, we launch that SAP HANA Vora Spark shell. And then we need to run a command within that Spark shell to find out the specific version of Scala we're using. So what we need to do is wait for the prompt, and then we need to run the following command, which looks like this. So when we get the prompt, we run this command, which is util.properties.version_string, and this will tell us the version of Scala. So because I'm using Scala version 2.10, it means I can use Apache Zeppelin version 0.6.0, and this is all explained in the installs guide. So I'm going to use and install Zeppelin 0.6.0. Now again on Apache Zeppelin's homepage, if I go to the downloads, there are multiple versions. We need to download 0.6.0, so this is the release. You've got a TGZ file here, which is the source. Also, you've got the binary package with all the interpreters enclosed. So this is the actual one I'm going to download. You can actually just download it to, for example, a Dropbox or an FTP server, and then what you'll need to do is get it onto your Linux server. So if I go to the home directory of this user, and I'm in the home and I'm using the user cluster_admin, which we created in the previous list of videos. What you can actually do is run a similar command, which I've actually got, which will get the file or the binary file and then copy that file to my local machine. So this is the command I'm running, a wget. The URL, again, all of this is in our GitHub repository. So do a search for SAP HANA Academy Vora and you'll find this file. And then we're going to output this to a file called Zeppelin 0.6.0 bin all tgz. So after a few seconds, you should see that it's finished downloading. And of course, the next step will be to unzip this file. So to do this, we're going to run the following command, which is atar-xzvf. And then we just need to put the name of the file, which is that tgz file. And it will export it or extract it into a folder within our home folder. There we go. So again, if I do a clear and an ls, now you've got that Zeppelin 060 bin all folder. So if we go into that folder, if I do a cd and do an ls, you can see we've got all the war files, jar files, and we've got the bin folder. So we might, rather than having to remember where that folder is, as we know it's going to be here, we can simply put it as an environment variable. So to do this, we just need to modify our bash rc bash file. So if I go and launch it as the sudo user with a sudo vi etc bash.bash rc, again, we've already covered this file in other videos, but this basically lists our environment variables quite simply. If I go in, all we're going to do is add another one which will link to where we've actually exported Zeppelin to. So it's in the home, for me, cluster admin, and it's the Zeppelin 060 bin all folder. Of course, you might have decided to put this as a different user. So I'm going to do a escape :WQ exclamation mark to quit, and I'll just launch the file again just to make sure I'm in, and again I'll do a Q exclamation mark and a clear. So all you need to do for that to take effect is to log out of the cluster manager user and then log back in. So I'm logging out and I'm logging back in. So what it of course means is if I want to now go into my Zeppelin home, all I need to do is go cd $Zeppelin home, and then if I do an ls, I'm in that folder. Now that we've installed Zeppelin, what we'll need to do is link it to SAP HANA Vora. So how do we do this? Well, SAP provides what's called an SAP HANA Vora Spark extension, which is an interpreter which Zeppelin, the user interface within Zeppelin, will use. So to do this, we need to carry out some tasks to link SAP HANA Vora to Zeppelin. So firstly, if I look at what is within our services folder within Ambari, there's a folder called package lib Vora Spark, and there's actually a folder called Zeppelin. If I go to the Vora Spark folder, you can see here we've got some other folders. So now if I go into the Zeppelin folder, you'll see that we've got this single jar file. So here you can see the build I'm using is Zeppelin 1393. Your version obviously might be a bit more updated, so you might have, for example, Zeppelin 13103. Additionally, if we do the same thing within Zeppelin and we go into the home folder of Zeppelin, there's a folder called Interpreter Spark, which also has a jar file. So what we need to do firstly is copy the jar file from our Vora Spark folder, which is in Ambari, and we need to copy that to our Zeppelin folder. So we can do this with the following command. So I'm just going to paste it in. So we're going to run a simple copy of the jar file, and it could be, the version could be different. So here you can see I'm using 1393, and I'm going to copy it to the Zeppelin Interpreter Spark folder. That's the first step. So now if I go back and look, we've got both of those jar files. Now you need to do this because the SAP HANA Vora extension library has its own SQL context class. A modified Zeppelin interpreter, which is called spark.vora, is therefore required to allow Zeppelin to run in this modified context. So what we need to do now is to enable this interpreter, we need to register it with Zeppelin. So again, first step is to copy that jar file. And within that jar file, there's a file called interpreter settings.json, which we need to include within the other zeppelin-spark.jar file. So how do we do this? Well, firstly, we're going to go to our Zeppelin folder, and we'll go to that interpreter Spark folder, which contains those two jar files. And then we need to run this command, which will essentially take out that file, which is interpreter-settings.json, from that Zeppelin file, that Zeppelin jar file. It only takes a few seconds. If I now run an ls, you can see, and if I actually make it clear and run an ls, you can see we've got this interpreter-settings.json file. So now we need to do the same thing for the other file. So I'm going to run a similar command, but now for the other command, but this time I'm running a UF, which is going to combine them together. So if I run that and again do an ls, nothing else is changed here, but now essentially the jar file contains an interpreter for both Spark and of course for SAP HANA Vora. So I can remove that JSON file, and if we go back, we've got those two jar files. So now that we've looked at installing and combining both the SAP HANA Vora interpreter with the interpreter for Spark, which is already in Zeppelin, what we're going to do in the next video is look at how to further configure Zeppelin so it starts up and so we're able to interact with SAP HANA Vora.